Real Catholic Man is a podcast whose mission is to inspire others, to learn together, and to encourage and fortify Catholic men to seek a principled life. Strong men are incredibly important in our culture and in the Catholic faith. Now more than ever, we need a strong male presence in our Catholic communities. We need real men who are not afraid to stand up for their beliefs, hold each other accountable, and spread the word that men need each other. Our families, our church needs us to be as strong as we possibly can be. We will attempt to answer those questions and to help each other to find new solutions. Each week we will feature guests who will help us along our journey to becoming the best and strongest men that we can be, so that we can take that strength back into our homes, our families, our parishes, and our communities. Please come join us along this journey as we learn and grow together, and if we renew our commitment to be strong male role models.
My name is Ryan Ayala, joined by Mr. Tim Mowery for another episode of Real Catholic Man. And we are just two Catholic husbands and fathers who are interested in only one thing, and that is talking about the truth. Can you relate to the following? You are sitting at your dinner table with your family and extended family members. And then all of a sudden, the topic of Catholicism comes up, and the density in the air changes because you know a very difficult conversation is about to occur. And of course, you, the practicing Catholic, is automatically labeled as narrow-minded, backwards, moralistic, and judgmental. But all you want to do is speak the truth in love. All you want to do is to share with your loved ones the beauty of Catholicism. Can you relate to this scenario? I think a lot of Catholic men can relate to this, but how do you balance delicacy, prudence, with the obligation to speak the truth in love? I have spent the majority of my life in and out of these encounters. I have read hundreds of books on evangelization, especially evangelizing those in the margins, especially those whom we love. Today, we're excited because we will be talking to Mr. Phil Kain, the managing partner from Rush Street Capital, to discuss how he has navigated difficult conversations with his family and share any tips and tricks for us men who may have a hard time in confronting these encounters. Before we begin, though, let's bring all of our petitions to Our Lady, as we say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. All right, well, welcome, Phil. Welcome to the Real Catholic Man podcast. How are you today?
I am doing great. I am really excited to be here, and I love what you guys are doing with the podcast, and I'm really happy to call both of you friends and excited to talk to you today.
Great. Right. Well, let's start us off. Tell us a little bit about your faith journey, who you are, and I understand you are possibly you're a convert. So tell us a little bit how you came into the Catholic Church.
How long do we have for the podcast? No, just when's the recording end? What package did you get with this? No. Anyway,
30-ish, 45 minutes, you know.
I grew up Presbyterian and converted to Catholicism in 2005 at the age of 36. So I grew up in a family that certainly believed in God, but wasn't really religious. And my mom picked the Presbyterian Church because they had the best youth group, and she thought it would be really good. So her heart was in the right place because she was thinking about her children, and she was thinking about what was best for the kids. But my mom was actually somewhat anti-religious, and my parents went to church like to see us perform in the church choir or to go to youth group. It's not like my mom went to church because she was really devout. And then later in life, as an adult, I figured out that my parents were kind of sometimes would say anti-Catholic things at home, but I didn't even know that's what they were at the time. I just thought it was, when you're a kid, you don't know any better, right? It's like I didn't know I grew up in a blue collar town until I went to college, and I was like, oh, I guess that was what it was. So it was hard for me. So that was part of the hesitation for me converting, because when I married a Catholic girl and got married in a Catholic church and went through, the pre-Cana. And then I had a good friend from college who told me, well, do you go to, mass with your wife? I go, yeah, we go to mass every Sunday. He goes, well, then why aren't you going to become Catholic? And I'm like, I don't know, it's not that big of a deal to me, And he said, well, what's going to happen when you have kids? And, your kids are like, wait a minute, how come dad doesn't go, take the Eucharist and dad doesn't go up? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll just deal with it. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. When my daughter got to be about 4 or 5 years old and we were going to mass every Sunday, it was like, yeah, this is kind of weird. This is kind of strange that mom goes up and in the Eucharist line and dad just sits here in the pew twiddling his thumbs. And then, of course, we had friends from church started asking questions. Then I got asked to sing at church and be one of the cantors. Wow. It was like, well, you guys probably should know I'm not really Catholic, And they're like, well, you come to mass every Sunday. So call that stubbornness, call that just stupid. But that really was my faith journey. And then at least into the church. But, I've always been a very prayerful and devout person since my mid-20s and since I got married.
So what was the turning point though? Why did you choose Catholicism? Why did you choose to finally say, yes, I want to go forward with this? I know there was a sense of to kind of show that, unity within your family, but was there something in particular about Catholicism that kind of drew you, that moved you to make that decision?
Yeah, I tend to be very analytical, and I know some people might know me as, being more extroverted and gregarious, but I tend to be very analytical. So I started reading and I started reading a lot. And then once I made the decision and joined the RCIA class, I kind of did a lot of self-study and just started, reading some of the greats. And what I uncovered was that I had so much bias that I didn't even know about. And that bias comes from all the normal things. It comes from the media. Media is very biased when it comes to the Catholic Church. It comes from family that I didn't even realize. And nothing malevolent, just, if you're not Catholic, just like if you've, never been to Pittsburgh, I mean, I don't know, I've heard it's like this. And there was a lot of that, and I had picked that up from family, well, I had heard this is the way the Catholic Church is. And then a lot of it came from the college and my college experiences and other people in other faiths. And so what I didn't know about, it's like, I guess now, and this is now my thinking when it comes to the Catholic Church, most people know most of the negative things about the church, and very few people know the positives. And that's the way I think about the church now. It's like the positives far outweigh the negatives. I mean, there's like, it's like the ledger balance isn't even close. There's like, well, there's these 1 million positives, and then there's these 10 or 15 negatives. Everybody knows about the negatives. And once you start reading, you're like, oh my God, did you know that like you can't even start any world history without talking about the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
The Catholic Church, helps more people every day, educates more people, feeds more people than any other organization that's ever existed in the history of the world. Did you know that almost all of the great literature that we have traces back in some way to something, that had some relationship with the church? So once you start uncovering all that, and then just the treasure trove of readings of all the saints and all the, past forefathers and early church fathers of the church, you're like, well, I got it. Even if you don't convert, why wouldn't you take advantage of this? Good Lord. I mean, we're all still human beings. The being a human being hasn't changed. I mean, the who we are as human beings hasn't changed with all of our technological advancements. It's the same. We go through the same struggles, the same temptations that I'm faced with today were the same ones that we're facing, human men 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. That's why they wrote this stuff. They didn't write this stuff because they were bored. They wrote this stuff because they had the same struggles that I'm going through.
Phil, did you ever hear that? Go ahead.
Real quick, I was going to ask. So did your, when you got married and when you talked about having children, did you and your wife plan to always send your kids to Catholic school? And also did that, because your conversion, I think, coincided right around the time with your oldest going to school. So I'm assuming always Catholic school. So that's my.
Same kind of thing. Like, I didn't realize this at the time, but I had this bias that I was very open to my kids going to Catholic school and going to Catholic church. Kind of like my mom was very open to her kids being really involved in church and being involved in church youth group, but she wasn't that interested in becoming really active in the church. And I didn't realize I had that same bias at 27, 28 years old. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't later until I figured out, well, I'm going to feel like I'm not a part of. That's going to be awkward. And I also didn't know, no one sat me down when I was 27 and 28, unfortunately, and told me, well, like it or not, you're the father, which means you're the spiritual leader of the family. No matter what you want to think, they're all going to follow you. And, and that's something you realize with experience that you talk about family and how no matter what I ever think, my kids are going to do what I do.
Yep.
They are not going to do what I say, and they are not going to do what I think. They're going to do what I do.
And that's an awesome responsibility. That's an awesome responsibility to lead, to provide, to protect. Absolutely.
So if I don't pray, if I don't think the Eucharist is a big deal, if I don't think the Eucharist is the centerpiece of my whole existence, well, then they're not going to. But if I do, it's almost a guarantee that they will come around to that belief and to that action.
Today's podcast episode of Real Catholic Man is brought to you by DiscountCatholicStore.com. Discount Catholic Store is building the world's largest e-commerce platform for Catholic and other religious items. With new products online every day, this is an incredibly dynamic group. Discount Catholic Store is more than just a website and a store. It is a community of spirited and committed Catholics who want to help get souls to heaven. Discount Catholic Store donates all profits to Catholic causes, and they want desperately to help you find anything that you're looking for. Please visit DiscountCatholicStore.com and join this community. Join their email list. Follow them on social media and participate in this growing movement. Get in on the action at Discount Catholic Store. It is truly a religious experience. Discount Catholic Store is a small business owned and operated by genuine and authentic followers of the Catholic faith who are seeking only to help you reconnect to the Catholic Church, stay connected, and engaged. Please visit DiscountCatholicStore.com today to receive some free promotional information.
Phil, I once heard a quote from a great doctor of the church. His name is St. Alphonsus Liguori, and he was talking about priests, parish priests. And one time he said, a priest never goes to heaven or hell alone. He brings his entire parish with him. And I thought about that with regard to the responsibility of the husband and the father. If we were to kind of modernize that quote, we would say, a husband or father never goes to heaven or hell alone. He takes his entire family with him. And so I love that. I love that you take that responsibility very seriously. I really do love that. I want to ask this question, and part of this question has to come back to kind of, again, another quote from a great saint, Fulton Sheen. He says, I'm sure you heard of this before. There are not 100 people in the United States who hate the Catholic Church, but there are millions who hate what they wrongly perceive the Catholic Church to be. Tell us a little bit about that, and kind of in the context of family life, in the context of extended family. Tell us a little bit about your experience with that.
Well, and I can use an example that Tim and I remember. Like, we were there was a business owner that we were got pretty close with, and one day he goes, "So Phil, you weren't born Catholic?" And I go, "No, I wasn't." He goes, "Well, when did you become Catholic?" I go, "I became Catholic after I got married. I was like 36. He's like, "Wait a minute, let me get this straight. You weren't Catholic and you
became Catholic when you were 36 years old. And it was just like this, he just couldn't believe it. He was like, he just looked at me like, like I told him I, chopped off my right arm or something. He just looked at me like, I never heard of something so crazy. And I think, and that's what we're up against. I mean, that's the cultural norm. I think he was probably closer to that cultural norm than we'd like to admit. He knew probably a lot of people that had left the church or had been born Catholic and no longer were, and he was one. And he, I guess, hadn't met anybody that had decided to become Catholic. So
Wow.
I can give that example, and I've had the same conversations with family members over the course of years.
Would you say, though, I mean, talking to someone who's not your family, it's a little bit easier to kind of, I don't know, sometimes dismiss or maybe even argue back or maybe provide a reason. But with family, it's a little different. I found the conversation to be very difficult with family, extended family.
No, it is. It's true. I would say, I would put it in the context of my favorite my favorite story from the Bible, and it's my favorite parable, and that's the parable of the prodigal son. And the reason is because the older I get, I have now lived multiple times the experience of all of the three key characters in that parable.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you bring up this, how do you talk about family? That's what I think of, because, most people focus on the prodigal son who, most people can't identify with at some point in their life. They screw up, they do something they shouldn't, and they have to come and ask for forgiveness. But, it was during RCIA. So how many times have you heard that, parable? I grew up Presbyterian. Certainly I heard that parable growing up. And I was in RCIA when it was the first time, and I felt like, God, I'm so stupid. First time ever that someone had said, well, of course, in this parable, as everybody knows, and I didn't know, that the Father symbolizes God, our Father, who always forgives us. And I was like, what? I never knew that. First time I'd ever heard that. Yeah. But now as a father, how many times have we all lived the experience of the Father, where our child screws up, or it could be somebody that works for us, or it could be a family member, a sister or a brother, or a parent even, where you're like, oh my God, they did this again? You did what? And it could be with money. It could be just with anything, like where you're like, you get the phone call and you're like, what? One of those where you're holding the phone out, they said they did this. What? And wait a minute. Wasn't I always forgiven every time I screwed up? Every time I squandered the money, every time I squandered the opportunity, every time I did something that I knew better than, wasn't I always forgiven? And of course, the answer is yes. I don't know how many times in my life I've been forgiven by thousands of people. And so you're faced with that decision. And then, of course, the older you get, if you haven't yet, you will have the experience of being that older brother in the parable, where you're the one going, wait a minute. No. I did the right thing. No. Screw this guy, this kid. No. He's a brat and it's not fair. And, just think of every week at church, the church pews would be empty if there were only people that weren't judgmental, right? The church would be empty every week. Somebody's like, oh, here's so-and-so showing up late again, probably shouldn't even get the Eucharist. I hear people say it all the time. They should just deny that person the Eucharist. Wow. Even if I believe and agree with you, what a statement. Yeah. I'm pretty glad I've never been denied the Eucharist. I'm pretty glad I've never gone up there and gone, they've been like, are you sure you're in a state of grace? Because I kind of know you, Phil, you might want to think about it. Why don't you go back and think about that some more and then see if, that's not the way it works, and that's right. Not the way I believe that, Jesus works. And that's, So that's the way I think about with family, because, and what that prodigal son story teaches me is just how attractive that is, right? I mean, how attractive is it that I know that no matter what I do, no matter what I ever say, how stupid I is, I'm going to be received by God. And then, I mean, think of Jesus on the cross, right? The criminal next to him, he said, you're welcomed into heaven. Yep. You've done all you need to do. And so that's what I think of when I think of family, because I have, family members who are violently anti-religious. The best thing I can do is be an attractive, make Catholicism as attractive as possible, because that's what's going to work. If I promote it and put it in their face, for me, that's just, I know that's not going to work. It hasn't worked ever that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I love this idea of making Catholicism attractive, especially with our families, because it's very difficult. Yeah, I want our family and our extended family who aren't practicing to look at my life and look at my wife's life and our family life and say, he lives differently. I want whatever he has. I want whatever I want whatever his recipe is. I want that because he lives his life differently. He's happy, he's joyful, all those sorts of things. So yeah, I totally understand that. So Phil, to protect yourself from essentially, I love this image of the prodigal son, to put on the merciful father. What do you do practically to prepare yourself to clothe yourself with being a loving and merciful father? What do you do?
That's why you have a backyard and a garage, right?
And adoration, Phil. Don't forget adoration.
Yeah, adoration.
Phil goes to adoration, I know, every week, and he has a scheduled time, and it's awesome.
Yeah. I go to adoration every Saturday night at 10 o'clock, unless I'm out of town. I would say that I think of those images that I spoke about on a regular basis, and especially with family members. I just think very deliberately about they're treated the way that son was treated in that parable. But it's very deliberate, and that's the older I get, the more I know that that's the way life is, right? The keys to life are, having discipline and staying in a state of grace and being prayerful and being deliberate. For most of the first half of my life, I just kind of let life happen to me. And I was not very happy with the results. And so, to be the best I can be, and to be the best man I can be, to have a chance to be merciful, well, I got to be very deliberate about it. I'm going to have to be prepared mentally and spiritually and psychologically before, and that was another thing. Same thing. I always thought family events were supposed to be really easy. Like you talked about the dinner table. Well, it's just supposed to be easy. Kind of like marriage. It's supposed to be just easy. And we all know how that goes, like you have to be very deliberate about it. Now I have a whole routine before I go to family events, prayer, getting myself in that mental state to go in, because, like we pray at church, we pray to St. Michael the Archangel to defend us in battle. Well, that's what it is. I mean, a lot of those battles, it seems, you think battles are like, oh, when I'm driving down the road. No, the battle might be at that kitchen table. The battle might be with family. Those people may be unwittingly tools of the evil one. I may be a tool of the, unwittingly, by, if they just say something and it triggers something. And that doesn't mean they're demonic. I'm just saying that that's the way I've come to understand. That's the way life is. It could be friends. It could be family members. It could be your kids. And so I have to be on guard at all times.
That's wonderful. And I also think putting on kind of this merciful father cloak, I also think kind of another level of of holiness and a kind of another level of patience. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this, but yes, not only the act of being merciful, but one of the things I'm learning as a young husband and father, now having to protect my own family and form my own family. And when I'm in conversations with extended family and family members, I've been trying to be more intentional in my head to really actually interpret them mercifully as well. So really give them kind of the benefit of the doubt and kind of understanding, how are you formed? Who are your friends growing up? How was your parent, how were your parents growing up? Where did you live? Like all those things contribute to the formation of a person. So I've been trying to do a better job at being merciful in my interpretation of my family and family members, because I realized that they didn't have the community that I have. I'm blessed to have you guys. I'm blessed to have a wonderful Catholic community here in Phoenix and in South Bend, men who keep me in check, awesome married couples, awesome Catholic families. But I also realized that for my family and extended families, they just didn't have that. So it's good for me to always acknowledge that they didn't have what I had growing up in terms of the Catholic culture that you and I have surrounded ourselves. So interpreting people mercifully, I also think is another level of putting on the merciful cloak there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. I also, it's maybe this doesn't work for some people, but it works for me. I always have to remember that, I'm a dangerous person. Like, and that, like they're like, if there's no such thing as evil, then good doesn't really exist. Like I can do some really evil stuff, and I can be a real destructive, person. And so I have to remember that. And that, like, even at my best, even if I'm being the best version of myself, I'm going to be wrong probably half the time. So a lot of times the best thing I can do is just shut my mouth in a family event. A lot of things I can just do is just remember, like, hey, Phil, how about you just don't hurt anybody today? Okay, that'd be a good start. If you could get through this family event and not cause a lot of injury and damage, I'd say that's a pretty successful, So why don't you just keep your mouth shut and just remember that going in, and then try to be of service and try to help and be productive and just be a part of. And
Phil, I once heard this story of Saint Philip Neri. He's known as the joking saint, the laughing saint. But part of his morning routine, he would look in the mirror, and part of his morning prayer would be to say, "Lord, don't trust Philip today." "Oh, Lord, don't trust me today." And he really meant that, because what he meant by that, it was funny, but what he really meant by that was, Lord, or if I go through my life today trusting myself, I will fail. Therefore, help my trust decrease in myself so that my trust in you may increase. So I love this idea of you recognizing that you have the opportunity to build people up in your family or tear them down. But it's only through the grace of God that you can build someone up. So anyways, I've never met a Phil. I've always wanted to share that story, but now that could be your morning prayer, Phil. Don't trust Philip today.
Yeah. A good friend of mine had a sign he had on his mirror that he got in the bathroom. He got every morning. It said, "You're looking at the problem, so get in the solution."
I love it.
That's awesome. I've sort of lost my screen here because my Zoom thing is trying to get me to upgrade, but so I can't see what I'm looking at. But the thought that I was going to come out with, I was looking at Ephesians 5 and thinking about, wives, love your husbands, and husbands love your wives as Christ loved you. So my question for you, Phil, is kind of like speaking to that of leading, providing, protecting, how does that kind of looking to the Gospels and into the readings, how does that kind of help play into your role as you're leading and guiding and providing and protecting for your family?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And as the longer I'm alive and the longer I'm a father, my family needs me to be strong. There has to be strength. I mean, that's, to me, when I think of Jesus, and then we all, he was the perfect man, but there was such strength in him. And it wasn't that he was, it wasn't muscular strength. It was spiritual strength, right?
like there was nothing wishy-washy about anything that he ever said, right? There was no like, well, you might want to try this or that. No, it's like, this is the answer. And whether I like it or not, and then there were often times where he used silence. He would just be quiet. And I think that there's that, to me, that image of that father figure. It's that quiet sense of purpose. When there's a time to talk, and then there's a time to just, no, we're going in this direction.
Yeah. And
that's what my family needs. That's leadership. And again, back to what I had said before, they're gonna follow my example. They're not gonna read something I wrote and then do that. They're not gonna, my hopes or my thoughts. They're gonna do what you do and follow your example. And I've seen that I don't know how many times. And it's true with spiritual stuff too. I've listened a couple of times. I've had the opportunity of hearing one of my kids be asked to say a prayer somewhere. And I'm like, they get about halfway through and I'm like, well, that sounds familiar. Because they're basically repeating something that my wife or I had said in one of our prayers.
I once heard this, gosh, I feel like I'm just quoting a lot of people today, but you're provoking a lot of thoughts, Phil. But Father Larry Richards has a book called Be a Man. I think it's called SOV or something like that. But in it, he has a line where he says, children will always love their mother, but they want to be like their father. They want to be like their father at the end of the day. So, yeah. All right. So I have a recommendation for any parent, father, mother, grandfather who's listening to this. I recommend reading this book written by Brandon Vogt of Word on Fire. It's called Return: How to Draw Your Child Back to the Church. Guys, I've read hundreds of books on this topic. I really mean it. This is by far the best book on this topic I have ever read. Really encourage any parent to read this. The Word on Fire team, they do a really beautiful job at giving practical suggestions on how to have these conversations, difficult conversations at the kitchen table and family reunions. We also are seeing that parents, when their child leaves the faith, the adult child leaves the faith, it's a real burden. It's a heavy cross that the parent carries. At the end of the day, a Catholic parent wants nothing more than to have his or her son practice the faith. And when he or she doesn't, it weighs on him. It's a burden. So this book gives really beautiful, practical, charitable, authentic, orthodox suggestions for parents to help navigate through those difficult conversations. So thank you so much for your time, Phil. We really appreciate your time here and sharing your wisdom. And everyone, thank you for listening to the episode of Real Catholic Man, the show where Tim and Ryan talk about all things Catholic, especially as it pertains to building a culture of authentic men. If you like the podcast or got something out of this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Subscribe, like, comment, rate, and review it if you haven't. Finally, as a gesture of our appreciation, we would like to offer you an exclusive discount code for listening to our podcast. Please visit www.discountcatholicstore.com and type podcast at checkout, where you will receive 17% off your entire cart. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
Hey, congratulations! You listened all the way to the end. Now, do us a favor. Please like and subscribe to our podcast, and you'll get alerted when we make new episodes, and you can keep the fun going. All right, thanks a lot. Have a great day. Thanks again.
Should I say she once had me? She showed me her room. Isn't it good? Norwegian room. She asked me to stay and she told me to sit anywhere. I looked around and I noticed there wasn't a chair. I sat on a rug, biding my time, drinking her wine. We talked until 2, and then she said, it's time for bed. No was alone, this bird had flown. Wow, I lit a fire, isn't it good? Norwegian